Still not quite there yet. Well, good evening, family. It's good to be back. It's still a little weird to be back, but good. My name is Jared. I think most of you remember that. It's always fun having a Bible name that's not super popular because you can make people feel really bad for not remembering your name. Like, what was your name again? Oh, it's the same as the son of Mahalalel, father of Enoch, grandfather of Methuselah, Genesis chapter 5. Anybody? Come on. Anyways, you don't read the genealogies? Man, you people are so unspiritual. Anyways, okay. But I would like to thank everybody. It was your support and your sacrifice that put me in Cambodia, and you guys sent me off there. I can only thank you in the spirit. In the flesh, maybe I'd seek revenge for the trials I faced there. It's all your fault. No, but it was a very shaping 10 months. It's always interesting. A lot of you ask how it was, and and what I did there. And I mean, if you could imagine me walking up to you and asking you, how was the last year of your life? And it's kind of takes me back, because it's really hard to think through 10 months of experiences and then sum it all up in a brief fashion. So long-windedness runs in the family, and I'm going to try my best to not keep you here all night. I realize that some of you feel the need to sleep at night. I don't understand you, but I will try to make compromises for your sake. Okay, I want to open tonight just by asking a couple questions. These are not super profound, but if you like science, this is a good time to raise your hand and show off. I'm just going to ask 4 questions, not super hard. You don't have to get super in detail with your answer. Just a simple answer will do. First question number 1, why does the sun rise and set? It happens every morning, every night. Sun rises and the night it sets. That's weird. Why does that happen? Anybody care to answer that one? It's not super difficult. Mr. Rollins? Okay, because God ordained it that way. Can I get another answer? The earth revolves around the sun. Well, sort of. That's why we have the years. Yes. Okay, the earth rotates on its axis. Thank you. The next question, similar in nature. Why did the stars come out at night? How come? Why did they come out at night? Why not the day? Anybody? Why do the stars come out at night? I mean, why are they there? Okay, there we go. Next question, real quick. Why does it rain? This one's a little more complicated. Why does it rain? Yes.
Water cycle, evaporation, condensation, moisture goes up into the clouds, and when the clouds are saturated, they drop it out.
Okay, so water's on the ground, evaporates up into the air, the clouds get sick of it, and then puke it out on the earth. What? Gave them an amoeba, they sucked up some bad water. Okay, good. Why does it snow? Similar question. Kind of the same process, right? Okay. Except for it's frozen this time. Got it. All right. I'll get back to those questions and why I asked them. Paul kind of ruined my mojo there, but we'll get back to that. I forgive you. We'll get back to those questions in a minute. A big part of what I learned there and what I studied there was culture and language and people, because obviously people are ministry, and in a cross-cultural situation where you're coming into a culture that's foreign to your own, you got to learn it. It's just like learning the language. It should be pretty obvious why we need to learn the language in order to be able to communicate with people. there's a lot of discussion that goes on in the world of art about language and the supremacy of language in art and communication. That's why the title of a painting is so important. Language is the primary mode by which thoughts, ideas, and emotions are communicated from one being to another. That's why we have this written down for us. And if you're wondering how foundational language is, I want you to think about this. Every conscious thought you have, every thought that comes in your mind that you're actually aware is there, occurs in a language that you understand. Can you imagine if you had a thought in Russian and you're like trying to figure out, what in the world is that? I'm thinking Russian. I can't, you couldn't understand your own thoughts. Which is one of the difficulties of trying to learn a new language, is to be able to begin thinking in that other language. But every conscious thought you have is or occurs in a language that you understand. So why culture? What's the big deal? Why learn the culture? Why spend so much time laboring over the worldview of those foreign people? My culture is obviously superior anyways. Well, culture is the context in which language occurs. Language and culture are vitally connected, and that, again, culture is the context for language to occur. Why is it important to study these things? Well, like I said, it should be kind of obvious, but in case it isn't, clearly communicating the gospel and the truth in general in a way that is understood, and I want to emphasize that, in a way that is understood, is foundational to making disciples, which is the mission of the church. Not social work, but that's another rant. So why the language? Why study the language? Why can't we just go and teach them my language and then disciple them through that? Because really, English is better anyways, more people speak it, so they should have to learn my language. They should just teach them English. Well, discipleship takes place, which, if they are fluent in English, that could take place. But discipleship takes place at the heart level. We must be able to speak to the hearts and listen to the hearts of people if we're going to be able to disciple them and really get to know them and really speak to what is in their heart and listen to what is in their heart. Luke 6:45, well-known passage, Jesus said, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And oftentimes your mother tongue is referred to as your heart language. There's a reason for that. Again, your conscious thoughts, those things that make you, are all occurring in a language that you understand, which is generally your mother tongue, unless you become very fluent in another language. But even after that, conscious thought is most often in your mother tongue. So language is vital. But why the culture? Again, culture is context. Understanding the language without the culture is like reading one sentence out of each book in a novel series. My dad talked about context this morning when he was referring to a hermeneutic principle. You got to read things in context. There's that $5 word, hermeneutics, interpretation. But hermeneutics in real life, interpretation in just life in general, must take place with a context. And culture is that context. If you don't understand the culture, even if you understand the language, everything that you're hearing is out of context. It's like having every one of your senses taken away except for hearing. You can't feel anything, you can't taste anything, you can't smell anything, you can't see anything. It's just you're hearing all these noises. And they're all occurring out of context. So in order to receive communication, and I want to emphasize this, in order to receive communication, you must understand the culture and the language. In order to give communication, you must acquire them. What I mean is they must become a part of you, who you are. Paul says, I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might win some. This is what we're talking about. Not just learning and understanding the culture, the receptor language, but also acquiring them and being able to pour yourself out in that cultural context in a way that is understood. And I hope to illustrate the importance of this by talking a little bit about culture clash, which I experienced a lot of that. It's just part of cross-cultural engagements. Culture clash is when two people of different cultures are operating correctly in their own cultural context, but the two don't mix. A man named George Bernard, you may have heard this quote, it's pretty popular. He said, "The single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place." This takes place in culture. This is what culture clash is. It's miscommunication, where you think communication has clearly taken place. But both people, and we do this on an individual level, but I'm going to talk on a broader cultural level for now. But both people assume that the other person is operating with the same cultural grid that I am. And both people assume that they can understand the actions and rightly interpret the actions and the words of the other person. It's like not knowing the language of another person and trying to guess what they're saying. If you don't know the other person's culture, and ultimately every individual is kind of a mini culture of their own. They kind of fit in this broad genre of culture. But if you don't really know the person, if you don't know their culture, if you don't know their heart, what makes them tick, it's like listening to a foreign language and trying to kind of guess what they're saying, and it doesn't work. We assume and we say, well, if I was doing that, that would mean this. And if I was saying these things, that would mean this. Therefore, they mean that. Because we assume that they're operating with the same grid that we have. If I can give you a slightly humorous example, I had a small cultural clash with a missionary family that was there just after I got on the field. And you're not really going to grasp this fully, but I want to explain it at least a little bit. In Cambodia, you don't talk directly. In America, we speak very directly. We're very just matter-of-fact with each other. Maybe part of being in an industrial society, things are faster. The fastest way to get somewhere is in a straight line. And we speak like that. In Asia and in a lot of parts of the world, they speak indirectly. They don't cut to the point. They kind of circle around the point, and then you're supposed to get it. And as Americans and as people in general, we are all very culturally proud, and we think the way that we do things is better. It's just a natural bend in our hearts. But people speak very indirectly in Asia. So you're supposed to read in between the lines, because people speak in between the lines. In America, you're not supposed to do that because people don't speak in between the lines. So if you're reading in between the lines and they're not speaking in between the lines, it creates culture clash. And this is what happened with a family called the McPhails, great people. And this is not bashing them at all. Again, two people operating correctly in their own cultural context, but it doesn't mix. So the example is this. I kept hearing comments, about a couple months after being there, I kept hearing comments of Jennifer and Forrest saying things like, well, I don't see you around much, or man, you're really gone a lot, or things like that, And in my American mindset, I'm thinking, okay, well, they're just making an observation about how I'm gone a lot, how I'm not around. But what they were doing right there, and I understand this clearly now, I didn't then, but what they were doing right there is inviting me to come over to their house. And you say, how is that? By making an observation about how I'm gone all the time and how I'm not around, what they were saying is that they would like for that to change. They would like for me to start being around. They were speaking indirectly, according to their cultural context. And that was very appropriate in their cultural context. But I didn't know that. I'm an American, and when I say that, most of you are probably like, well, how can they do that? That's not fair, speaking indirectly like that. Well, I felt the same way. I'm an American. So I made a comment about, well, and I explained to them my daily schedule. This is what I do in the morning. I get up, do this. I go to the Carlisle's house, start working, blah, 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 blah. So they make a comment about how I'm gone all the time. And I take it for what it is. I take it at face value. And I explain why I've gone a lot and why I'm not around. And to me, that's it. But what just happened there? What they were saying was, I want you to be around more. You should come over. And what I said was, I'm too busy for you. Because I answered their remarks by explaining my busy schedule and then by continuing to not be around. And I just offended people because I didn't understand their cultural language, and I assumed that they're operating in the same cultural grid that I am, and they assumed the same thing about me. Now you have two people operating in their own cultural context correctly, but it doesn't mix, and it creates conflict and misunderstanding. To give a less humorous example, the culture clash between the pioneers, the American pioneers, and the Native Americans. If you laugh at this one, we can all call you a horrible person. No, but when the pioneers came over, they came to the Native Americans and they bought their land, right? And they would make these purchases from the Indians, buy their land, start working on it, and then all of a sudden, the Indians would come back and they try to take their land back. And that's why we have the term Indian giver. Because they gave the land to the pioneers, they took the money for it, and then they went and tried to steal it back. And then we have the term Indian giver, and then we created wars over it. Well, in the Native American worldview, land is not a commodity that can be owned by an individual. It's owned by the tribe, and more than that, the spirits of the ancestors of that tribe inhabit the land. They have dominion in that land. And this is very common in the Old Testament. If you talk again and again, different cultures talking about the land of our fathers, and even the Israelites viewing Jerusalem as the place where God's Spirit dwelled. But this is how the Native Americans viewed land. The spirits of our ancestors inhabit this land. This land belongs to this tribe. The only way that land switched hands is if one tribe conquered another. And when one tribe conquers another, not only does the physical tribe conquer this tribe, but the ancestors of this tribe conquer the ancestors of this one. It's a spiritual and a physical warfare that takes place if one tribe is to conquer another and take their land. So the Native American people, it was customary in their culture. They would entrust land to people with stewardships. And they did it to people in their own tribe. They would allot this person this much land to work it for a short time, and it was customary to present the chief with a gift for allowing you to use the land, because he's the head honcho. So when the Native Americans see these pioneers come over and they're wanting to use our land, and the pioneers pay them, the Native Americans are thinking they're being polite. They're doing the culturally appropriate thing, and they're offering the chief a gift for him letting them use their land. But land is not a commodity that can be owned by an individual. It's owned by our tribe, and the spirits of our ancestors dwell in this land. So the Native Americans, they take this gift, and they let the people work on their land, and then they come back to go back to their land, and these guys won't get off. They won't get off our land. They're trying to steal our land. And by doing so, they're also making a front to my ancestors. They're trying to take my ancestors captive by stealing my land. You wonder why they got so violent. But we didn't understand this. The pioneers are thinking, man, these people sold us our land, they're trying to take it back. They're criminal. And the Indians are thinking, the Native Americans are thinking, these people are trying to steal our land, and they're making an assault on our ancestors. We can't let them do that. And now you have two people, again, operating correctly in their own cultural grid, and the two don't mix. And it creates wars. and the virtual destruction of the entire people of the Native Americans. Over what? A miscommunication, a big misunderstanding. And it happens because we assume that we understand people. And I assume that you're just like me, and if you're not, you should be. As difficult as it is to acquire a foreign language, so it is difficult to acquire a foreign culture. Why? Because your culture defines you in ways that you're not even consciously aware of. And I gave you examples of that. The pioneers had no concept of ancestors inhabiting the land. Like, what is this? And they all viewed land as a commodity to be owned, to be bought and sold. It was an asset that was used at your discrimination. And the Native Americans they had no concept in their mind that land was a commodity that could be owned by an individual. No concept in their mind of that. The McPhails, they had no idea that I wasn't getting what they were saying. They were speaking indirectly and assuming that I was hearing what they were saying. And I was listening directly, not indirectly, and I was assuming that I was listening, that I was hearing what they were saying. I assumed I understood them, they assumed they understood me, and it's because we're not even consciously aware that we're doing that. We just do it. We just assume that we understand each other. So I say again, George Bernard, the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion, or could I say the assumption, that it has taken place. I'll give you an example, and maybe step on some toes. No offense, Richard. You answered exactly how I wanted you to, so you're good. Let's talk a little bit about naturalism. Naturalism, and we'll figure out why as I kind of go along here. Naturalism states, in its basic form, whether or not there exists any supernatural forces is practically irrelevant. What happens in the natural realm, in the physical universe, is just that. It's natural. Everything that happens is a result of scientific processes and laws that are at work within the natural universe. Since human beings are the most highly evolved, autonomous component of the universe, of the natural realm, they have a great deal of influence as to the destiny of the universe, don't they? And I say that very purposefully. The most highly evolved, autonomous beings in the universe, in the natural realm. If that is the case, and if the supernatural realm has no force, or if it doesn't exist, then human beings should have a lot of influence in the destiny of the universe, right? That's why we can fight cancer. That's why we can stop AIDS. That's why we can end famine, end hunger, because we can make it rain. Animism. Animism is the opposing worldview that I want to kind of contrast naturalism with. It's also known as spiritism to some. And that's what takes place in Asia and in a lot of the world, and actually in some part in our Bibles, which I'll get to in a second. In animism, in the Buddhist worldview in Cambodia, which this is actually not really a Buddhist worldview, but everyone who says they're a Buddhist is a liar because nobody actually follows what Buddha taught. They all kind of make it up as they go along, but that's another story as well. Generally, in animism, there are two realms. There's the natural realm and the supernatural realm, which is what I talked about, the physical universe and the spiritual realm. The difference between these two worldviews, between spiritism or animism and naturalism, is that in animism, the supernatural realm not only exists, but it is actually in direct control of what happens in the natural realm. In other words, what happens in the natural realm happens because something in the supernatural realm caused it to happen. That's why they worship spirits, to make it rain. Because I am just a human being. I'm confined to this natural realm, and I can't make it rain. I need some higher power, somebody in the supernatural realm. I've got to get a hold of them so that they can do their thing and make it rain here. Because they have the power to manipulate the natural realm. I don't. Because they're in the supernatural realm and I'm confined here. Or they're in the spiritual realm and I am in the human realm. And just to clarify what I mean, natural realm is the realm of mortals, the realm of man and beast and all of that. The supernatural realm is the realm of spirits, angels, gods, what have you. So back to my questions. I asked, why does the sun rise and set? If you could open your Bibles to Jeremiah 33, just real quick. I want to do this right here because I want us to see not only that there are other worldviews, but that actually they might have it right where we have it wrong. And that the way other people think might actually be closer to what is true than what we naturally tend to think. So Jeremiah 33, if you're there, verses 20 to 21 and then 25 to 26. Again, my question is, why does the sun rise and set? And again, Paul kind of stole my thunder there. But it says, thus says Yahweh, if you can break my covenant with the day and my covenant with the night, so that the day and the night will not come at their appointed time, then also my covenant with David my servant may be broken, so that he shall not have a son to reign on his throne. Now to verses 25 and 26. Again, this is Jeremiah 33. Thus says Yahweh, if I have not established my covenant with the day and the night and the fixed order of the heaven and the earth, then I will reject the offspring of Jacob, and David my servant will not choose one of his offspring to rule over the offspring of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. For I will restore their fortunes, and I will have mercy on them. Why do the stars come out at night? And you all can turn to Job 38. I'm going to be referring to that several times because it's all very tightly knit in that chapter. Job chapter 38. And this is God responding to Job. And I want you to remember, as we're looking at this, again, what we're contrasting is naturalism. Ergo, what happens in the natural realm is natural, versus animism. What happens in the natural realm is caused by something in the spiritual realm. So, Job 38, verses 31 through 33, why do the stars come out at night? To whom then will you compare me, that I should be like him, says the Holy One? Lift your eyes up on high and see, who created these? He who brings out their host by number, calling them by name. This is Isaiah 40, sorry. I misread that. This is Isaiah 40, 25 through 26, but you should be in Job 38 because I'm about to go to there. So excuse me. But he who brings out their host by number, calling them all by name, by the greatness of his might, and because he is strong in power, not one of them is missing. And then where you are, Job 38, 31 through 33. Can you bind the chains of Pleiades or loose the cords of Orion? He's talking about constellations here in the sky, just to clarify that. Can you lead forth the Mazzaroth in their season? Can you guide the bear with its children? Do you know the ordinance of heaven? Can you establish their rule on earth? And the implication being that no, God does that. Why does it rain was another question I asked. Why does it rain? And that's going to be in verses 25 through 28, same chapter, Job 38. Who has cleft a channel for the torrents of rain and a way for the thunderbolt? Oh, there you go, lightning as well. To bring rain on a land where no man is. Yeah, that'll show you how much influence man has in this vision. Bring rain on a land where no man is, in the desert where there is no man. Says it twice. To satisfy the waste of a desolate land and to make the ground sprout with grass. Has the rain a father, or who has begotten the drops of dew? Job 38, 34 through 35. Can you lift up your voice to the clouds that a flood of waters may cover you? Can you send forth lightning that they may go and say to you, here we are? Again, the implication being, no, you do that. Now, why does it snow? There's another question I asked. In Psalm 147, and I'm about to refer back to Job 38, so you can stay there. But in Psalm 147, 15 through 18, he sends out his command to the earth. His word runs swiftly. He gives snow like wool. He scatters frost like ashes. He hurls down crystals of ice like crumbs. Who can stand before his cold? He sends out his word and melts them. He makes the winds to blow and the waters flow. Job 38, 29 through 30. From whose womb did the ice come forth, and who has given birth to the frost of heavens? The waters become hard like stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. To take it a little farther, I asked some questions that I didn't even ask. Why does the ocean stop at the shore? I heard that in a song once. I believe it's the Scarecrow's song in Wizard of Oz. He asks, I could tell you why the ocean's near the shore. Well, let me tell you why the ocean's near the shore. Job 38, 8 through 11. Or who shut in the sea with doors when it burst out of the womb? When I made clouds its garments and thick darkness its swaddling band, and prescribed limits for it, and set bars and doors, and said, thus far you shall come and no farther, and here shall your proud waves be stayed. So why is the ocean near the shore? That's a good question. And again, Paul kind of stole my thunder with the correct answers to the questions, being that God ordained these things to be as they are, and he has a covenant with the sun and the moon. But we don't think this way. And that's what I'm trying to get at, is that this worldview right here is foreign to us. We do not naturally think that the supernatural realm, or that one in the supernatural realm, is in direct control of everything that happens in the natural realm. Everything. When the sun rises and sets, we tend to think about the earth and how it rotates on axis. When rain falls upon the earth, we tend to think of the evaporation cycle, where water goes up into the air, the clouds get sick of it and puke it on the earth. That's all I remember. That's what I'll write on my science exams if they ask me, which is why I don't score well. But that's what we tend to think of. We tend to think of the, quote, natural processes of this universe, and it's just part of the game. It's just part of this whole life thing, right? And since I am the most highly evolved, autonomous being in this natural realm, I should have a lot of influence. I should be able to do a lot of things. I should have a lot of say as to what this whole universe thing does. That's why I'm going to stop global warming. As if you could, even if it was legitimate. I just want to take a brief look at Job 38:39. It really goes all the way through the end of the chapter. Not 38:39, I think I meant. Excuse me. Yeah, no, I was right. I was just in the wrong page in my Bible. No big deal. But we can read here concerning the animals and their nature and ask all kinds of questions that are answered here in the same way. In the same way. God asked Job, can you hunt prey for the lion or satisfy the appetite of young lions when they crouch in their dens or lie in wait in the thicket? Who provides the ravens its prey when its young ones cry out to God for help and wander about for lack of food? You watch Discovery Channel or Animal Planet or whatever, and you see all these things happening, and they talk about animals and their nature and them acting according to their instinct, right? And they're just animals, and they just kind of do this stuff. No, actually, God does this stuff. And it's not the scientific answer. The scientific answer is entirely wrong, but science merely describes how God does what he does. When you say the sun rises and sets, the earth rotates on its axis, that's not answering the question, why does the sun rise and set? That may answer how. How does it rise and set? Well, that's how, but why does it do that? Because God has a covenant with the sun and the moon. God does it. And again, he goes on all the way through chapter 39. This is a humorous one. I just want to mention this one at least real quick. But if you look at that whole chapter with this thought in mind, that the supernatural realm, specifically God, the sovereign God of the universe, and when I say that, I hope we really mean it. It talks all about how he is in control of the animals. Go through animal after animal, going to the horses. And of course, in 40 you have in 41 you have the huge dialogue about the Leviathan. But in 39 verse 1, he says, "Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you observe the calving of the does?" This is funny to me. My brother pointed out to me how humorous this was. And you might not find it funny, but to me, that's a funny question. Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Have you ever seen videos of mountain goats? Where are they always? Like walking on this little path, and if they take one step to the left, they're going to die. Like fall several thousand feet to their death. When did they give birth? Where? Where did they give They're always up on these mountains, the steep slope. Like, do you know where they give birth? Do you know when they give birth? And to me, it was just humorous that God points that out. It was like the mountain goats. And you always see them like in this place where I would be deathly afraid if I was standing there. And yet somehow they find a place and a time to give birth on those massive heights. But just to give a couple summary passages in the New Testament, referring to, this is again exposing the deity of Christ in the New Testament, but referring to Christ specifically as the sovereign God of this universe. In Hebrews chapter 1, verse 3, a well-known verse, it says, "He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of his nature, and he upholds the universe by the word of his power." All the universe is upheld by the word of the power of Jesus Christ. Colossians 1:17, similar idea. "And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together." In him, every molecule of the universe holds together and does not separate and kill us all. So beginning to make this a little more personal, perhaps. Why does one army defeat another? And this is something I'll show. Hopefully I remember to put it in there. In Cambodian art, you'll often see, again, I talked about the human realm or the natural realm and the supernatural realm. Oftentimes you'll see a battle scene happening where the soldiers are going out to battle and they're waging war, and then above them you've got the supernatural realm. And the angels of one army are fighting against the angels of the other army. And what happens in the physical realm, in the natural realm, that's not what matters. What happens is, are my gods stronger than your gods? And that's the idea all throughout the New Testament, in case you've been missing it. When one army goes up against another, in the Cambodian worldview, and in the worldview that our Bible is written in, what matters is not, are our men stronger, better equipped, better weapons? That's not important. What's important is, are my gods stronger than your gods? If my gods defeat your gods, then we're going to win. So what happens, the outcome of the battle in the physical realm is determined by the battle going on in the supernatural realm, in heaven. And again, I can explain all these things, and we can look at Scripture, but it's so hard for us to think this way, because we're like, this is so, at least I know for me, for a while, it was just like, this is so, I just feel dumb thinking this way. Because we've been taught that it's foolish to be superstitious like that, to think that spiritual forces are at work. But it's true, they are. And it's clear all throughout our Bible. So why does one army defeat another? Really quick, just to give one example passage in 2 Kings chapter 6, starting in verse 15, he says, "When the servant of man arose early in the morning and went out, behold, an army with horses and chariots was all around the city. And the servant said, 'Alas, my master, what will we do?' And he said, 'Do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them.'" What is he talking about? Those who are with us. He's talking about the people that are with us are more than the people that are with them? Because if that's what he was saying, then he lied. No, he's saying that those spiritual forces that are with us, i.e. angels in this case, so we assume, are greater in number than those spiritual forces, those spiritual powers that are with them. And here you see, the outcome of this battle, this is what he's telling his servant. The outcome of this battle is not what's about to happen here. It's about what is going to happen right now in the spiritual realm between those who are with us and those who are with them, and we will win the battle. He goes on to say, "Then Elisha prayed and said, 'O Yahweh, please open his eyes that he may see.' So Yahweh opened the eyes of the young man, and he saw, and behold, the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha." Additional examples would be in Jude chapter 1, verse 9. Well, obviously Jude is one chapter, but in Jude verse 9, Michael is depicted as fighting with Satan over the body of Moses. In Daniel 12:1, Michael has charge over the people of Israel, Michael and his angels. And then again in Revelations 12:7-9, you see Michael and his angels fighting with the dragon and throwing down the armies of Satan out of heaven onto the earth. So they ask another question: how come you can think? This is a great question of psychology. How come you can think? Think about it. Again in Job 38, if you're still there, verse 36, he says, "Who has put wisdom in the inward parts, or given understanding to the mind?" And in Daniel chapter 2, verse 21, he answers that question. "He changes the times and seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding." And to back up, he removes kings and sets up kings. That should be a comfort and a conviction to those of us living in America. A conviction in that we should be wary of speaking a dishonoring word about our rulers that God has set up, and sobering in that God does send evil rulers in judgment upon a nation. And that's clear all throughout Scripture. So it seems, from all of these examples, and we could give more, we could go all day with this, it seems that from the examples given that one in particular, one in the supernatural realm, is in direct control of all of the affairs of the natural realm. And it looks like our worldview is not as superior as we thought it was. Our naturalistic bend is why so many American Christians have a lot of messed up ideas about soteriology, the doctrine of salvation. Naturalism takes the sovereignty of God out of everyday life. And it places a great deal of influence, misplaced influence, on the will of man. Because again, if I just think that these things that are just happening, they're just happening, and that natural disasters, to give you another example, all these just kind of happen, and it's just bad, and we just need to who did that? Was God surprised by that? Like, oh man, it just happened again. Another tidal wave. Great. Another hurricane. I mean, we see it every year. But we take the sovereignty of God out of everyday life, and we just view these things as just kind of unconsciously. Again, the point in all of this is that our culture unconsciously shapes the way we think about so many things. Again, when we get sick, that's another big one. When we get sick, we don't think something spiritual is going on. And I'm not saying that, God is making you sick as a punishment. Obviously, that's what the book of Job that we were just in would have something to say about that. But when we get sick, it's just like, again? Great. It's just an unfortunate part of natural life. It's a natural part of life, and it's unfortunate, but it happens, and we have doctors and whatever. And we usually all just kind of assume that we're going to get better, and when we don't, we blame God because now he's in charge. I was hearing the testimony of a man named Puck. He's the deacon in the church at ICC, or the church in Posat. And part of his testimony is that when he turned from worshiping demons, he said, the demons would make me sick, and they would afflict me, and they would persecute me to try and get me to go back and worship them. The demons would make him sick, is what he said. And without a thought, we in our American naturalistic worldview can be like, you're being superstitious. Was he wrong? Who made Job sick? The devil himself. Why? So that he forsake God. But then we know that God is ultimately sovereign over these demons, and that he purposed that sickness ultimately to the praise of his glory, and ultimately for the building up of Job. And that's what God does. It's so funny. He holds his enemies in the palm of his hand. Go ahead, make him sick. And Satan purposed it for evil, and God purposed it for good. No matter how hard Satan tries, he can't do anything that God does not allow and that God does not ordain. And ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, Satan will have done nothing but to further along the ultimate ends that God has ordained for his universe. Because God holds them all in the palm of his hand. The psalmist says, why do the nations rage and all of the people plot in vain? Their kings and the rulers set themselves up against the Lord and his anointed, saying, we will cast their bonds from us. He who sits in heaven laughs. He holds them in derision. He holds them in the palm of his hand. So I just want us to get this. And I may say some unpopular things real quick, but I know I'm in good company. And my dad's in the front row, so all good. So who then can be saved? And this is where it's going to maybe step on some toes a little bit here. But this is where naturalism is in my estimation, one of the most pervasive forces in American Christianity and leaks into our soteriology. Who then can be saved? How can a man be born again? And I want to ask that question, and I don't want you to answer it this time because I don't want to embarrass anybody that bad, if that might be the case. But I want you to think about that question in light of the questions I just asked. If these just natural everyday occurrences take place at the hand of a sovereign God, who is saved? How can you be saved? How are we brought to saving faith? I mean, I'm a very highly evolved component of this universe, right? lot of influence on the way this universe thing, and especially my own self. That's a huge one in our culture, self-determination. You just believe it, do it. Good luck with that. Self-determining will. I believe I can breathe underwater. But we tend to think that. We tend to think, I have a lot of influence as to the course of this universe, and especially of my own self. If I can't control anything else, when it comes to me, I got it. And when it comes to my destiny, I got it. I pull myself up by my bootstraps. If I just work hard, I'm going to get this thing. I'll tell you what, there's some Cambodian people who work harder than any American I've ever seen, and they're dirt poor. Your hard work did not make you born an American. Did not give you the opportunities that you have. So when it comes to our soteriology, when it comes to the doctrine of salvation, who can be saved? How can a man be born again? I was out in Dalo, a precious couple, Paul and his wife Pana, and it's okay if you can't pronounce their names correctly. I won't be offended. But Paul gave his testimony, and I won't go into giving that whole thing. But when we turned to his wife Pana, she's very soft-spoken. She's not a woman of very many words. So she kind of said, and you may have seen, I posted something about this. But when she was talking about her salvation, she said, when my husband turned to Christ, I was so furious. She said, I said, I don't care if you divorce me, I don't care what you do, I'll never believe. And I was determined that I would not become a Christian, no matter what. And her husband, Polk, started laughing, just remembering those times and how she used to be and fight with him all the time over this issue of Christianity. And he said, so why did you believe? And she just looked at us and she just kind of said, well, God brought me to himself and made me believe. God worked in her heart according to her words and brought her to saving faith despite that she was determined not to believe, just like all of us were prior to saving faith, if we're honest. This woman is functionally illiterate in her own language. She can sort of read, but actually getting ideas from a page, it's so far from her. She's the wife of a rice farmer out in the middle of nowhere in Cambodia. But she has a better idea of how God saved her than the average American Christian. And just to illustrate this, in Luke 18, cross references would be Mark 10, 26 through 27, and Matthew 19, 25 through 26. But Jesus is talking about how the rich can't be saved. And again, this is another area where we don't understand an animistic worldview. In an animistic worldview, if somebody's rich, it's because the spirits that they worship are powerful and they have the ability to influence the natural realm to make that person rich, which is why prosperity gospel around the world is so huge, because I can connect you to this Jesus, the spirit that made me rich and powerful, and they worship Jesus just like they would worship any other spirit. But I'll try to stay unidirectional here, stay on one point, because there's so many things that are connected to this. But when Jesus is talking about how it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven, those who heard it said, who can be saved? Because the rich people are the ones that are blessed by the most powerful spirits and the most powerful gods. If it's hard for them to be saved, if it's impossible for them to be saved like that, who can be saved? And he says, what is impossible with man? I want to emphasize that. We have to talk about all things are possible with God. Yeah, but the same all things that he's talking about right here being possible with God are impossible with you. And I want to emphasize that. What is impossible with man is possible with God. John 3, Jesus is talking to Nicodemus. Jesus answered him, truly, I say unto you, unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. Remind me again how much you had to do with your birth. Did your mother ask your opinion when she was going to give birth to you? How about before you were conceived? and be like, well, let's ask the unconceived child what he thinks about being born. See if he wants to go through with this. And then after he's conceived, they're like, oh, well, we got to ask his opinion, because if he doesn't want to be born, I mean, we can't let him. My mother did not ask my opinion. She didn't ask what I wanted to do when I was in her womb. Do you want to be born, Jared? And I could, and it would be folly. That's the point of this. It would be folly. Could I answer her? Did I even have a will that I could say something? It's utterly ridiculous to think that a woman would consult her child over whether or not he wanted to be born. So again, I ask you, truly, born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God. He goes on to say, unless one is born of the water and of spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. And to emphasize that, unless you're born again, you can't see the kingdom. You can't even see it unless you are already born again. So I want to put that thought in your head. How much did you have to do with your natural birth? How much less did you have to do with your supernatural birth? Popular, unpopular passage here. I have written down just real quick Romans 9. Some of you knew that was coming. Romans 9, verses 10 through 24. And you can go ahead and turn there. I'll give you a second. And I really just want to drive this home because it is an area, again, where naturalism has pervaded into our minds to the point where we hold on to this right to have this self-determining will that our naturalistic thinking tells us we have, to the point where we would call somebody immoral if they challenge my right to decide, to self-determine. And I would be careful because so did the people that are referenced in this passage. Romans 9, verses 10 through 24, he says, and not only so, but also when Rebekah had conceived children by one man, our forefather Isaac, though they were not yet born and had done nothing either good or bad, in order that God's purpose of election might continue, not because of works, but because of him who calls, she was told, the older will serve the younger. As it is written, Jacob I loved, but Esau I hated. What shall we say then? Is there injustice on God's part? Is God unjust to challenge my right to self-determining will? By no means. For he says to Moses, I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. So, then it depends not on human will or exertion, but on God who has mercy. And I do want to emphasize that. God has mercy. For Scripture says to Pharaoh, for this purpose I have raised you up. Again, he raises up kings. The Daniel passage referenced earlier, Daniel 2:21. He removes kings and sets up kings. For this very purpose I have raised you up, that I might show my power in you, and that my name might be proclaimed in all the earth. So then he has mercy on whomever he wills, and he hardens whomever he wills. You will say to me then, why does he still find fault? For who can resist his will? But who are you, O man, to answer back to God? Will what is molded say to the molder, why have you made me like this? Has the potter no right over the clay to make from one lump one vessel of honorable use and another for dishonorable use? What if God, desiring to show his wrath, you want an unpowerful or an unpopular clause in the Bible, God desiring to show his wrath, that's unpopular, and to make known his power, has endured with much patience vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, in order to make known the riches of his glory from vessels of mercy, which he prepared beforehand for glory, even us whom he has called, not from the Jews only, but also from the Gentiles. I want to close with that. Let's pray.